a lot of the model improvement through the eyes of the ARP project. We are also applying it in the small county collaboration for integration. Okay, so carrying on, the CIMH is hosting 3 collaboratives, ARP, SCCI, and CIC, and we'll be talking this afternoon a little bit about how we're using the model for improvement to advance the aims of those collaboratives and those of the participants within them. I want to start by recognizing the source of the model for improvement, which is a tool for achieving desired improvements. It was developed by the Associates in Process Improvement back in the 1980s and has been used in a multitude of industries around the world, and has been used quite a lot in healthcare since the early to mid-90s, particularly by the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, who used it throughout collaboratives that they've hosted over the years, as well as other improvement projects. It's now a commonly used technique for improvement in many, many healthcare systems, both hospitals, outpatient centers, and other public health settings. So a well-adopted and recognized tool for improving healthcare outcomes, and we're excited to be building upon that knowledge base. The model for improvement derives from a fundamental law, and that is that improvement only comes from changes. But not all changes will result in improvement. So the power of the model for improvement is in the context of the changes that you make. And where the model for improvement promotes smart changes that actually lead to improvement, that bring a benefit back to the organization pursuing the changes, and very carefully avoids those changes that don't result in improvement, so that you don't end up pursuing and putting resources into things that aren't fruitful. So this is an underlying law that will guide and influence the use of the model for improvement in all of our work, and really points out how imperative it is to focus on changes when we're looking to make improvement. We are looking to find in the model for improvement in our collaborative work those changes that result in improvement. We're very selective and intentional about finding changes that can work, alter how we do our work. Might be if we were making a product, it would alter fundamentally the makeup of the product. And that change, that alteration, produces a visible positive difference, and one that is a substantially improved one over historic norms. So we're looking for substantive improvement over current practice, current levels of outcomes. We want really significant movement in outcomes. I just realized that folks weren't seeing the slides, so I've advanced the slides to the changes that result in improvement, and pointing out here the last bullet point, which is that we're also looking for changes that have a lasting improvement. So very focused on making certain that the changes that we make and all the resources that go into making changes result in long-term benefit. So again, a high focus on smart changes in the context of using the model for improvement. The use of the model for improvement is guided by 5 core principles. It starts with knowing why you need to improve. So having clarity and consensus around why you're undertaking any kind of improvement, whether it's to a large organization or within a small and focused environment. The second is having a feedback mechanism that tells us whether or not we're achieving the improvement that we want. improvement is actually resulting from our changes. The third principle is becoming very effective at making changes. We want to make sure that the way we carry out the installation or implementation of a change results in improvement. So it's not just enough to know that we should make a change, but we need to be effective at making that change in the appropriate environment. And to do that, the fourth principle applies, and that is that we do a lot of testing before we attempt that permanent installation or implementation. We test it, learn a lot, make sure that we're actually going to gain out of it what we want. And then the fifth is knowing when we've sufficiently tested an idea that we have enough knowledge and insight onto how to make it permanent that we should now proceed with the changes into an organization or a system that makes it permanent. So the model for improvement uses these 5 principles consistently throughout its use. And it also recognizes that there are 3 ingredients to making an improvement a success. The first is will. We need to make sure that we have the will, the desire to do what it takes to achieve the improvement. We also have to have the good ideas. I already made reference to this, how important good ideas are. Ideas that will lead to improvement are a necessary ingredient. And then finally, we need the good execution. So I've already essentially referred to these 3 things, but we point out at this point that the absence of any one of these 3 ingredients is a pretty good predictor that the attempt at improvement will not succeed, that you're likely to fall short of the desired outcome that you have if very likely you won't make any progress. And so assuring as you proceed that you have sufficient will, good ideas, and the ability to execute is what enables you then to embark on a successful improvement project. And so as we use the model for improvement in our mental health projects, we're paying attention to these and cultivating all 3. And in fact, over time, we're taking advantage of the fact that they are very interactive. Will often supports the creation and identification of great ideas, but great ideas might in turn create more will in more people who are excited and interested in a topic. So ideas for change are very powerful. And good execution of good ideas can also build will, where folks see in action a thoughtful and well-developed change that they can get behind and believe in. So part of that model for improvement is taking advantage of the cumulative effect of building will, identifying and executing good ideas. So we keep our eye on these 3 areas as we work through any kind of a change activity. The model for improvement looks like this. It's got 3 key questions, and we'll go through each one of them here shortly using examples from the Advancing Recovery Practice. It also has the testing cycle known as Plan, Do, Study, Act, or PDSA, and explain how that fits in with these 3 questions. But one of the things to point out at this point is that the model for improvement is a general model. Any kind of effort at improvement that is undertaken can take advantage of this methodology and what the model offers. So it can be from individuals, an individual or a group of individuals, a team, a whole organization, anything in between. So it's a very general model that has broad applicability. The formality and the structure of how you apply it can vary substantially, but the concepts and the methodology within it hold up regardless of the scale, regardless of the structure and formality of approach. So many clinicians have told us that the model for improvement looks a lot like a really good treatment plan and how you actually help clients achieve changes that they want. So it's something that fits very well on an individual basis, even a personal basis. I know personally for me, I'm using the model for improvement to try to improve my exercise activity. So it's really very valuable in terms of any kind of change at any level. So coming back to the 3 questions and starting with the first one, the fundamental questions for improvement start with the question, what are we trying to accomplish? And in this point, we're really trying to make sure we have clarity around what it is that we're looking to achieve. And also at this point, assuring that we have some degree of consensus around what this is. So clarity and consensus are a part of how you answer this first question, and I'm going to offer here some specifics as we go about trying to do this, and in particular, developing an aim statement or an aim for your improvement effort. To break it into a couple of things. What are we trying to accomplish? So this gets to the brass tacks. What system are we aiming to improve? What subpopulation of clients? What time frame? What issues matter at this point to the organization and should come into play in terms of the kind of improvement activities that we're going to take on? Why is it important to do this? Especially in a time like today, there are many things driving us to make improvements, and it's very important at the beginning to be clear about where that drive is coming from. What makes this particular improvement project important and to this organization? Do we have any data or analysis to support why this is important? We certainly in the mental health field know that there's a lot of opportunity for us to improve. The data is, we've got a lot of data about opportunities for improvement and why it's important that we embark upon it. And then specifically, what are we trying to accomplish in terms of anticipated outcomes? So getting a lot of clarity around specific and measurable achievements that are the results of the changes that we make. So we want to have goals and objectives that are pretty well spelled out that help assure that we aim at the right thing and we then in fact get there. I'm going to offer you now the aim that is serving as the overarching aim for the Advancing Recovery Practices Collaborative. In this case, we have 16 teams coming from county and community-based mental health programs that serve adults and older adults, and they're focused on advancing clients' recovery, and we're using the same sort of definition of that. The teams that are doing this include the providers of care, leadership, clients, and their stakeholder representatives, and the focus is to ensure that clients transition to higher stages of recovery in their pathway of recovery. They increase their independence from the mental health system, so they increasingly need the mental health system less and less, and have developed more meaningful and self-directed lives in their communities of choice. So those are three important things that we're trying to do that we state here in the aim. By working with the clients to improve their health, home stability, purposefulness of life, depth and breadth of relationships in the communities, the teams are working to increase the number of clients that they serve using the same or less funding. So a big part of what we're also trying to achieve through this project is helping clients by making them, improving their recovery, increasing their independence, and eventually having them move out of the system or at least reduce substantially the amount of services that they need. They're allowing new clients to come in, and we're therefore able to take the same amount of resources and serve more clients. So we want to overall, in addition to serving and improving individual outcomes, improve the public mental health system's overall capacity to serve its communities. So very large overarching aim, and our teams that come together are all working under this umbrella. But it serves as an example of a statement of being clear about the answer to the first question, what are we trying to accomplish? We also have identified a variety of objectives that clarify and translate that broader aim into more specifics. So in this particular case, we talk about improving the overall emotional and physical health of our clients and their ability to manage their own health. We want to increase the number who are in a safe and stable home. Increase the number of clients who report that their life has more purpose and that they are, as they desire, engaging in meaningful activities. I won't go through any more of these. You can read them, but we're getting clear about what we mean in the aim statement by delineating these objectives. We even take it to the next level and identify more specific measurable goals. In the case of advancing recovery practices, we have two categories of goals. The first is recovery, and we're talking very specifically about outcomes that we want to achieve for the client. So very clear here about what we want to achieve. We want to increase the number of clients that transition to a higher stage of recovery while they're in services. We want to decrease the number of clients who leave before their goals have been met. Increase the number who report that they're living in their preferred home, and obviously we've got numeric goals here, and these are important in terms of how we measure our success and our progress. So these serve as examples of outcome goals, but we also have some system goals. So we have some goals for how we're hoping our system changes, that we'll in fact be able to see more clients total with the same number of resources, that staff receive recovery-oriented supervision. That's an important system change that we want to measure because it's indicative of and predictive of good outcomes for clients. Similarly, we want to make sure that clients are receiving recovery measures on a regular basis. And the others that are listed here speak to this ability to measure and be clear about the changes to the system, the improvements to the system that we want to make, and have an ability to monitor whether or not we're making them as we go. And then moving into the second question, how will we know that a change is an improvement? And you can begin to see that the way we answered the first question, what are we trying to accomplish, we've already begun to think about how we will know that a change is an improvement. It is our measurement strategy. So answering this question is about understanding what specific measures are required to allow us to learn about the impact of our changes, that tell us whether or not the changes we're making are, in fact, leading to improvement. And what are those key outcome measures that tell us whether or not we're actually making progress towards the aim? So we've got to have some pretty smart measures in place to make sure that the effort of making the changes is leading to improvement, and when it's not, allows us to make some course adjustments and learn, and then proceed forward again. And I'll offer here some examples coming from the Advancing Recovery Practices. These are some of the measures that the participants are using. They're looking at the number of new client admissions. The goal here being that we can increase the number of new clients that come in because more clients are successfully leaving the system. We want to look at the number of clients who leave the program within 6 months of enrollment. Our goal here would be to reduce that so that we don't have folks leaving before they have made their desired progress. We're looking at the average length of enrollment, thinking that over time, ideally, we can help clients achieve their goals faster by virtue of the work that we're doing in ARP. I'll skip down and point out there are client-reported measures, so we ask clients to tell us how they feel about their services and their satisfaction with them, how they feel about their overall wellness, and their confidence in the changes that they're making. And these tell us, we believe, important things about whether or not the changes we're making are helping the clients receive or benefit from our services. I won't go through more of these, but you can see we have an array of measures here that we systematically tackle, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But they'll allow us to take on a complex aim and with a wide array of goals and objectives and begin to measure and see whether or not we are making headway. Here are two examples of how we actually tackle these measures. Now, it's a little bit complicated to look at initially, but all of our teams and the way we answer question number 2 in the model for improvement is to track data, the measures over time. So in any time that we have a measure, and then going back to these measures here, for each of these measures every month, we capture data that tells us something about that measure and plot it month to month. And I want to have you look at the first one, percentage of clients with current recovery measurement, and pay attention to the dark dots with the pink line. That's the actual measure, and it correlates with the scale on the left, which is a percentage scale of 0 to 100. And this particular team, you can see, started around 22% of their clients having a recovery measurement, but in the course of some change work they did, and this is July 12, August 12, September 12, you can see time plotted across the bottom, they're starting to make some headway and increasingly having clients with a current recovery measurement. And you can see the dotted line at the top shows where we'd like to be. So the team has a ways to go, but they're on their way. The blue line correlates with the far right scale, and that is the number of clients that these folks are currently serving in this project. And so we're able to always keep our eye on the target population and the normal ebb and flow of client activity. So this team was ranging from about 175 clients up to about 200 month to month. But it tells us something about the client population that we're serving. The second measure here is one of measuring impact on staff. And so this particular measure is telling us whether or not clients are receiving strength-based individual clinical supervision. And again, the blue line tells us how many staff there are. That's the number of staff. And the pink line, when more importantly, the dark dots, tell us each month what percentage of staff receive clinical supervision. And the team whose measure is reported here has made substantial improvement from having essentially no strength-based clinical supervision to now getting up into the 40 to 60% range, starting to be on a consistent basis. So this is data, the measurement that we use that helps teams see whether or not they're making progress. And something to point out here in the top graph, the percentage of clients with current recovery measurement, while the team has made progress, they're at 40% currently and they're moving upward, their work is not done. Even though they've made improvement, we want to see them move up to 90%, or they're aiming at 90%. So this would help keep their focus on the change work until they reached and were able to sustain that level. So it's an example of how the measures are used to support improvement and answer that second question, how will we know that a change is an improvement? The third question is the powerhouse question. What change can we make that will result in improvement? I think from the beginning I pointed out that the model for improvement is really focused on change, bringing smart changes that really help an organization achieve what they want. And here are some examples of the advancing recovery practices changes that teams are working on. And changes can come from a variety of sources. External experts can bring them in. They can be evidence-based practices or what experts have found in other parts of the field to work, and they're brought in from that external source and applied locally. Or they can be developed within the team and locally developed. They can be adapted from knowledge that already exists within an organization. But identifying really powerful changes is a big part of the model for improvement. And you'll see later in this presentation that we at CIMH have focused a great deal of our effort on bringing very valuable changes to the teams who participate in our collaboratives. There's a pretty big array here, but starts off with identify clients' strengths and goals. So teams that have potentially not done this using a strength assessment, for instance, learn how to do this. Practice through testing. We'll talk a bit more about that in a little while. And begin to make headway with a variety of other improvements with clients because of this ability to identify their clients' strengths and goals. Another change that they might undertake is to use a tool like MORS to measure individual client recovery progress on a regular basis. And so in the improvement effort, we're systematically bringing in and testing and applying changes that will lead to improvement. And this will make more sense as you see how the collaborative process works, but useful to get a sense of the kinds of ideas that are relevant to the application of the model for improvement within our CIMH collaboratives. So coming back to our picture of the model here, I want to focus on the circle, the PDSA reference here. The PDSA cycle is all about execution. If you remember, we talked about the three ingredients that are necessary for improvement. One is will, two is ideas. We just talked about that in terms of changes. The third is execution, really being able to take great ideas and make them work successfully for you, your organization, wherever you're applying it. And that's what the PDSA cycle enables. It comes from the work that Schuhart did in the early 30s. And many folks know and have heard of the PDSA cycle, which was the Plan, Do, Check Act that Schuhart developed, but was revised by Deming in the 50s when he really became one of the leading experts in quality improvement. Deming changed C to study, so no longer is it simply to check the results, but you actually examine the results. I'm going to come back to that in a moment because it's a really, really important element of what the PDSA cycle enables an organization to do. This has been used widely in many industries and now, as I already suggested, throughout healthcare for the last 15-plus years. So the PDSA cycle, a powerful tool for our work now and going forward. One of the things that I want to point out now about this is that the PDSA cycle enables an organization, a team, an individual to learn from testing. And learning and improvement are directly correlated. It's virtually impossible to gain improvement without gaining new knowledge. So the PDSA cycle and the model for improvement are systematically in pursuit of learning and the generation of new knowledge that then will be useful to teams. And so the cycle is almost like a machine for generating knowledge through learning that leads to improvement. I'm going to talk now through each one of these components of the cycle. But again, the idea is through the Plan, Do, Study, Act, you're undertaking a structured and continuous quality improvement method. You test changes in a disciplined but rapid fashion. These are it's often thought that a PDSA cycle can take weeks or months or even longer. And in fact, PDSA cycles can take hours. Several could be done in a day. The good PDSA cycle is very rapid. And then they're used repetitively to test changes. So we're going to come back to that, both of those here shortly, because they're so important about effective use of the PDSA cycle. But the ultimate benefit to this kind of testing is it provides us a path forward. We go from having an idea to learning about through testing how that idea will work in your particular setting. And then based on being better informed, we're able to make the changes in our organization that will lead to improvement. And ultimately, this approach of using the PDSA cycle as a means to test ideas prior to implementation brings about a culture or a focus on experimentation. And this is a particularly important aspect of the experimentation culture is necessary for PDSAs to really bear fruit for an organization. So you'll see as you go through these and learn about these components that experimentation, that sense of learning and being open to failure is a predominant theme. So let's spend a little time going into why test. Why not just go straight to implementation? And it's not uncommon for teams to say, we don't have time to test, we have to just do it. But there's a really powerful set of reasons that testing is worth the time and effort that it takes. It will actually accelerate your improvement. But one of the first points about why test instead of just implementing is that it builds support in your environment that the change will result in improvement. That you'll increase your buy-in and belief that the change is a good change. We often work in environments where folks are pretty suspicious of change and highly resistant. So dealing with that from the get-go through testing is a powerful reason to proceed with testing. Another is that we can actually predict what will happen from the change. We will know when we make this change permanent what's really going to happen. We don't want to make it a leap of faith. We want to have a lot of evidence through our testing that we can predict when we make this change permanent, we will get the improvement that we want, and we know any unexpected consequences and have dealt with them. So predicting what's going to come from the change is a powerful reason to test. That ability to predict is an outcome of our ability to, or that through testing, learning how to adapt a change to whatever the conditions might be in our local environment. So testing reveals what's unique about a given environment. One idea in one agency is going to work in a unique way compared to another. And so we want each environment that's going to use a new idea and make a change to understand those local conditions, the things that will make or break a change, and adapt the change accordingly. We also, through testing, can reveal the true costs of the change and any unexpected side effects, both of which then can be dealt with through testing to accommodate, to make sure that the cost can either be reduced or accommodated. The side effects can be minimized, although often side effects are positive, and so positive side effects are taken advantage of. So we want to reveal through testing those unexpected consequences, good or bad. And then again, when the change becomes permanent, we're in a better position to minimize resistance because we've tested in the environment. Many people have been involved in the testing, and they're going to be ultimately champions to promoting that change. There are more reasons to test, but these 5 are really, really powerful ones that that generate a great deal of payback for the effort spent in testing a change. And again, I'll just point out that the culture of experimentation is a a necessity in successful testing. We should test everything, test every day. We are always coming up with new ideas, sometimes in formal projects, often just in trying to make improvements day to day. Testing it helps us make sure that the changes we make work and answer and then give us the benefit of these 5 bullet points I just covered. One of the other things about the culture of experimentation is it changes the perspective on failure. When you test and fail on a small scale, it's a powerful learning opportunity and a very positive thing in actuality. It prevents failure on a large scale down the road, but in the early stages of testing is an incredibly rich opportunity for learning about what you do and don't need to do to make a test work. And it tends to be very different learning than tests that are successful. So it does require, though, a culture of experimentation where a test that doesn't go so well isn't viewed as a bad thing. It's viewed as, instead, a learning opportunity. We also bring data into the testing and learning process to make sure that we have a means of really capturing what has happened in a test, and we can learn from it. And we also recognize that, inherently when you're working in a culture of experimentation, you're going to do multiple tests. There's a sequential nature to learning. You don't learn all in one fell swoop. You learn through multiple iterations of testing and building the complexity of your change. So recognizing that there's a real sequential nature to learning rather than trying to learn it all in one step is embodied in the culture of experimentation. So a really nice way to put this statement of the culture of experimentation is to think about moving from trial and error to trial and learning. So the PDS part of a PDSA cycle is about really focusing on the learning from the testing. And instead of looking at a failure as an error, the failure is a learning opportunity. And the most effective testers are the ones that are the best at gleaning the learning from any test that they run. And we find that as our teams get better at pulling the learning out of their testing, they have the fastest improvement and the most improvement. So going into the actual PDSA cycle and each component of it, the P, and you'll see as we go through this that the 3 questions for the model for improvement show up again in the actual PDSA cycle. So in the plan, we're asking the question, what are we trying to accomplish? And we start with a recognition that when we're testing a change, we have a hunch or a theory that this change will be a good thing. We have a sense of what's going to happen when we do this. But rather than saying, looking at it as a firm belief, we actually put it out there as a theory, and we say we're going to test that this particular change is going to have the effect that we think it will. In the test, we're very clear about who's going to do what. This could be things like, Mary tomorrow is going to run this test at 2 o'clock for 3 hours on these 3 clients. So when the test will occur is very clear. What do you have to do to prepare for the test? So Mary might do a little education on a form that you're testing or a new technique that you're testing. So there's a little prep, a little training that might be necessary. And then what data are we going to collect to determine if the test has been successful? So we might want to just interview Mary to say, tell us how it went for you. What additional information did you need? How long did it take you? But we have a plan for how we're going to gather the data and the learning out of the test. Who is going to do that data gathering? It might be the same person that tested it. It might not be. How long will the test be conducted? And then it's noted here in bold italics, the final point is what is expected to happen? And this comes back to the approach that you're starting off with a hunch or a theory that the change is a good thing, and you're actually going to make a prediction about what you think is going to happen. It's not uncommon that you can say, when Mary tries this tomorrow, we expect clients to resist this change because they're not ready for it. Or you can say, we think clients are going to be so excited about this change, but staff are going to be really unhappy. We think it's going to be very time-consuming. We think it's going to take an hour, when in fact we're worried about that. We don't think we're going to have an hour. But those predictions enable us to, it sets the stage for rich, rich learning. So we start with a plan. And then we do it, carry out the test, and document the unexpected events. And this is one of the richest parts of the learning, and it happens more often than not that something doesn't go as expected with the plan. And that's why you test. That's exactly why you test. You get the feedback from the team about the test. You have an eye for the measured results, so you're capturing the data that's coming out of the test. And getting that feedback, qualitative information from the participants in the test is really important. So you carry it out and document it in the do step, and then it leads you to this all-important study step, which is analyzing what happened. You take a look at the data you gathered, and you reflect on the results, debrief with the team members, and very importantly, you compare what did happen versus what you expected. And it's the difference between what you expected to happen and what did happen that reveals a whole new set of knowledge that's going to be powerful as you move forward. And in fact, in the study step, you want to take all those lessons learned and capture them, write them up, be clear about them, especially any of those unexpected positive or negative results. Obviously, the positive results you want to take full advantage of, and the negative results require us to rethink what we're doing. And from there, we can determine what could be improved next. And we would then prepare, in the act portion, what to do next. And there's a couple things we could do next. More often than not, we test again, because we now got more knowledge than we used to have about this particular change. So we're going to modify it and do another test. Sometimes we gain knowledge that tells us to abandon something. It's a cautionary step to quit too soon. Sometimes it's just a matter of needing to test more to find a way to get something to work versus abandon it. But sometimes that will be the determination. This test was what revealed that this is just not a good fit. And regardless, then we determine our next step. Very often it's the next test of change. And your next test of change is a more informed test of change. And this is how the cycle comes about. Now you're going to repeat the test. And in fact, we call it going up the ramp. As you are starting out with hunches and theories and testing them, going up the ramp means that you're often your tests get larger, more complicated as you learn more. Eventually, you've learned enough that you can actually make it, you have knowledge about the change that will result in improvement. You could actually install or implement into your organization the change that will work. So repeated use of the cycle is what really brings accelerated improvement and achievement of desired aim. Here's an example that comes out of the advancing recovery practices, where we are using the strength assessment to identify client strengths and goals as one of the powerful change ideas. And so the idea is use it to assess strengths. And the very first cycle, many teams did this. Their very first cycle was to have the clinical supervisor actually simulate doing the strength assessment. They didn't even do it with a client. And then the supervisor did it with 1 or 2 clients. And as the cycles grew, more people did the testing, and they did them with, they moved into doing them with actual clients and staff doing them with actual clients. So the size and the complexity of the testing grew over time. And as a result of that, the teams learned a great deal about what it takes to train an individual, how to do a strength assessment, how long it takes. What are the tricks about doing this process with client? What are the things that work and don't work, or what's the array of approaches that you might bring? What's the timing for doing the strength assessment? Should you do it in the first visit with a client or the 5th? Or what's the indicator that it's a good time to do a strength assessment with a client? That was the kind of information that came out of this repeated use of PDSA cycles. And so by the time teams had gone through a considerable number of tests, they had a lot of confidence about how to make the strength assessment a tool that they could apply in a useful way in the organization that helped their clients. That on the surface seemed very straightforward, but in practice had complexity that was revealed and learned about through testing, and then could be successfully addressed through implementation. And in fact, in advancing recovery practices, as with our other collaboratives, our aims are pretty complex. And so what really happens is multiple changes are undertaken, and go up their individual ramps. And very often they're related to each other, so information is flowing from one change category to another. And they take some project management skill to keep track of these. Sometimes they're done as this implies all at the same time. Very often one series of tests are run, and once they've started down the road, then another step might come on. But complex aim statements that have complexity to them require a range of changes, and so the PDSA cycle and the ramps are applied to that range. And this essentially demonstrates the range of things that ARP teams have been working on. And it's one of those areas that when you're working on a complex change like this, you want to make sure you've got a strong team lead and some ability to support these parallel endeavors. So I want to switch now and talk more specifically about how the model for improvement is applied in the Breakthrough Series collaborative approach and how we've been using it in the 3 collaboratives that are currently underway, and that will inform how we proceed in the future with comparable projects. The Breakthrough Series collaborative approach comes from Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and they consciously develop with the intention that we need to bridge the gap between what we know and what we do. That often the knowledge that's in the field about what works best is very slow and unreliable in reaching the field and therefore reaching our clients. So we want to learn from one another and from experts ways to bridge the gap so that we're literally advancing what we do to match what we know works well. And that's a very complex undertaking since our environments are all so varied, and there's a multitude of folks working with the same clients. So here's the focus and the general intention behind a collaborative approach. A collaborative helps organizations to improve the quality of services they've delivered by using proven processes, strategies, and tools, so taking advantage of what the field knows. Often these are evidence-based practices or techniques that are well developed but maybe not widely used. It focuses folks on the changes that have the greatest benefit, and this is a big one. We could change a lot of things in what we do, but we don't have a lot of time and energy to spend on making changes, and so we want to change smartly. So the collaborative approach is about finding those changes that will make a measurable difference, that really make a leapfrog forward in improvement. And then the collaborative approach also supports learning and improvement across organizations who have similar aims and come from similar approaches and will benefit from learning from each other as well as from experts. So ultimately, a collaborative approach like ours is based on using the methodology relies on adaptation and spread of existing knowledge, but does not. It's not about research and creating new knowledge. We're looking for what's known to work and bring it into improvement projects. So here's a picture of the collaborative model. I'll point out at the top here you'll see the reference to pilot. So when you first start a collaborative methodology like this, it's wise to start small before a multitude of teams would join it. So in our particular case, we work with at least initially participants team volume of about 5 to 10. When we move to past the pilot phase, collaboratives can hold 20 teams, 50 teams, 100 teams. They can even go larger. So collaboratives have the potential to have real breakthrough improvement because they scale to a very large level. So they don't start at that level. They start in a pilot, and that's where we've been working, and that's what the picture I'm showing you now. Again, this comes out of IHI's collaborative model for achieving breakthrough improvement. It's an adaptation of the core processes that they apply in collaboratives, and I'm going to walk through the general components of it. Want to remind folks that the 3 collaboratives that are underway now, we've already shared a bit about advancing recovery practices, so here's just a reminder. We also have a small county integration collaborative, and in this case 13 teams are working towards promoting better health status for their clients who are at risk for or have serious mental illness, but also have needs around physical health. And so these small county mental health teams are really paying attention to and supporting their clients' needs related to physical health conditions and accessing physical health services in a successful way. So the integration work is about how can mental health change the way it does to support the client's interaction and benefit from physical health. So it's change within mental health but focused on physical health outcomes, and it's producing very exciting results. The third integration collaborative is the Care Integration Collaborative. It has a similar focus in terms of looking at clients with mental health and substance use concerns, but trying to bring in their attention to their physical health by integrating with primary care, substance use disorder organizations, as well as health plans. So the CIC project is about bringing together different agencies who have clients that they have in common, who have complex needs, and will benefit from coordination of those services and collaboration or integration of those services, so the net benefit to the client is greater than if individual pieces work in silos. So the third collaborative is fairly complex and is focused in this multi-agency approach. I think you probably noticed that there's 13 teams in SCCI, 16 in ARP, and back here we said that pilots start in the range of 5 to 10. Well, the reason for that is that this is actually the second iteration of collaboratives. So the precursor to ARP was known as the Increasing Client Service Capacity Collaborative, ICSC. This has been completed and had 4 teams in its pilot. So we're in a slightly expanded pilot mode with ARP. The first pilot was just 4 teams. And then similarly, the SCIRT Primary Care Integration Project is the precursor pilot to SCCI. It had 6 or 8 teams, and it's completed, and the knowledge that we gained from it has led to SCCI. So that's the reason that ARP and SCCI are a bit larger than an initial pilot, because we've taken our first step forward. The collaborative to integrate primary care is smaller because the approach of bringing in so many partners is new, and so we're really starting much smaller. So just a little background on our own learning and using the model for improvement and how we are building our knowledge at CIMH to support successful collaboratives and good outcomes for all the teams who join them. The Breakthrough Series has essentially 3 phases. There is a preparatory phase. I'll make mention of it, but I want to focus on these 3 here. The preparatory phase, which is not circled, is the effort that leads up to getting started, and it's all about finding the experts who have the knowledge about what changes work and putting those changes into a usable format for the teams who are coming into the collaborative. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but there is a great deal of lead work to support and set up a successful collaborative. But what we have circled here is this recruitment of 5 to 10 teams, and then pre-work. And so we start a collaborative with teams coming together and getting organized, establishing an aim statement. So in this case, they're actually writing their aim statement and answering that first question. They're starting to get familiar with the measures, and they're preparing to make changes. So this first pre-work phase is a very important phase to really get folks ready for the change work. They do some self-assessment and make changes that will be or self-assessment around the kind of changes that are ahead, so that they gain some awareness of maybe areas of emphasis. So pre-work is the first phase. Just a reminder, they convene as teams. We bring them together actually to initially get to know each other. The multiple teams are introduced to each other. We give them a pre-work manual that outlines their pre-work activities, and they actually begin the shared learning process during pre-work. So there's twice monthly calls where they begin to benefit from seeing what each other's doing, learning from that, and as a result, being able to move that much faster. The second phase, and this is the very long phase of the project, is the one circled here, and it's the learning sessions and action periods. So I'll call attention to the white boxes with LS referenced in them. LS is the learning session reference. Learning sessions are in-person meetings, usually 2 days, where whole teams come together and benefit from experts in whatever change topics are relevant for their particular aim. They learn from experts in the model for improvement. They learn from each other, and they have an opportunity to do a lot of planning and preparation for what they're going to do with the new knowledge that they've gained during the learning session. And that leads into what you see here is referenced as AP, action period, and that is exactly what it references. The teams between coming together in person are on their own making their changes, testing changes, going up the ramp. As soon as they've had success with their changes, moving into implementation. So there's this iterative process of coming together in person, learning from experts, from each other, planning what they're going to do, then making the changes and working the tests in between, coming back and then to a next learning session. And what happens as the learning sessions proceed over time, the learning that has accumulated up to that point is shared, and new knowledge about it, new ideas are brought in. So the volume of changes that are shared over the course of 5 learning sessions grows. And by the end of the learning sessions, which is about a 12 to 16-month period, the teams have had a chance to test and implement an array of changes that are meaningful to their aim and make progress towards that aim. During the action periods, I do want to point out that the teams are still going through a shared learning process. They, twice a month, come on the phone and talk about what they've been testing and learning. So we get a chance to go deeper into the changes that they're working on, their experience with those. Teams often choose to emphasize different changes, and this is a chance for folks that maybe didn't proceed with one particular change to hear from another team about it and maybe begin to think that they do want to do that. And they get a jump start because that particular change now they have even more knowledge about. So this learning action period sequence is a powerful part of the change process. Again, this is just a summary of what's happening during the learning sessions and the action periods. I want to point out this is also when the measurement process is taking place. So every month, teams are measuring the impact of their changes. They take core measures. They all use the same measures, gather data on it, and report it. We plot it over time. So they can use that to determine whether or not the changes they're making are moving them towards their goals. The measurement is another big part of what's happening during the learning session and action period part. So we'll sort of a summary here of what's happening during this phase. I also want to point out, this is where the model for improvement becomes a powerful tool. So within the learning session and action period phase, we reference here the PDSA cycles. So encircled here in red is the model for improvement, PDSA cycle, and the technique that teams use to make their changes. So they're actually using the model for improvement during those action periods to have success with the changes that they're making. In fact, we give them lots of instruction and support around how to carry out tests. This is an example of a tool that enables them to plan for tests that they're going to run. So in learning session meetings where they're together, they can actually begin to plan out tests of change that they've learned about from faculty or from other teams. So when they leave the meeting, they're prepared to do it and study and act on it, and then hopefully keep the cycles going until they've really built a knowledge base around the change that readies them for implementation. So this is an example of a tool that we offer, as well as how they can use the model for improvement in the Breakthrough Series model to gain progress towards their aim. And then finally, here at the very far right is the harvest reference, and that is at the end of the pilot, we bring the teams together and we look back at all that's been learned and gather it. When we started at the beginning, we had our own theories and predictions about the changes that teams would make. We brought faculty in based on our theories, and this being a pilot, we're looking back to say, Were these changes useful? Is there a better way that we could have presented it? Which changes are you making the most headway with that we would share with future teams to carry forward? So this is a very valuable step in the pilot process for setting the stage for carrying out another collaborative that's even more effective and that we can offer to more teams. It's an in-person session. It's a real consolidation of learning and a powerful part of the whole process. So to summarize what the collaborative structure is like, we use expert support, both to prepare for the collaborative and then throughout. And then the experts often are faculty that come into learning sessions and share what they know about what works. We create a lot of peer interaction so teams learn from each other. Teams work under the umbrella of a shared aim, but they each individually have their own aim that's most relevant to them. So they don't adopt necessarily the shared aim. They work within that as a way to then assure that they're going to interact successfully with other peers. They will have a common strategy for measurement, and then we bring this rich set of changes, change package that help teams make changes that are improvements and achieve their goals and their aim. That's the overall summary of the structure, and hopefully you've got a sense of how the model for improvement is woven throughout that. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Karen, I cannot see the attendee box, but if people want to put their questions in the question box, we'll be able to answer them.
Okay, I know that was a lot of information, so we are happy to do follow-up if there are subsequent questions.
Oh, here's a question. So Cricket says, no question. Nice summary, Karen, and thank you.
Cricket, thanks for the feedback. Appreciate that, and lovely to know you're out there.
Do any of the other attendees have any questions? You can put your question in the question box, and we can answer the question if you want us to. Doesn't look like there's questions.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all for the opportunity to share the model for improvement information as well as how we apply it in the Breakthrough Series collaborative approach. Look forward to your questions in the future.